The birth of the Primarchs. By the 30th millennium, the Emperor of Mankind had brought order to Terra. Through the brutal unification wars, he crushed rival warlords and techno-barbarian kingdoms, forging humanity's remnants into a single empire. While securing Terra, the Emperor began creating the Primarchs, 20 genetically engineered sons, each representing a fragment of his genius. However, the forces of chaos intervened and sabotaged the project, driven by their hatred for the Emperor, and scattered the young Primarchs throughout the galaxy in a warp storm. Some sources suggest the Primarchs' mother, Erda, played a role in their dispersal, but we have conflicting accounts of this event. Stranded on remote worlds and often unaware of their true origins, each would grow up shaped by the culture or tyranny of their adopted homeworlds. Some would grow up as rulers or warriors, and some in exile under harsh conditions. Meanwhile, the Emperor also developed the Astartes Legions, also known as the Space Marines, using genetic material from the Lost Primarchs. These powerful warriors would form the backbone of his forces during the Great Crusade. Over time, the Emperor set out on a quest to find his lost sons. One by one, the Primarchs were discovered, and each was reunited with the Gene Seed Legion created from his DNA. Among them, one stood above all others, the one destined to become the Emperor's favorite son, Horus Lupercal. The rise of Horus as Warmaster. By the early 31st millennium, the Emperor launched the Great Crusade to reunite humanity across the galaxy. Vast fleets of the Imperium ventured out, bringing thousands of worlds back into his rule. It was also during this time that the Emperor began to rediscover his lost sons. Alpharius was first to be found, but he was kept secret. Instead, the first to be revealed was Horus, who had grown up on the world of Chthoniya, a harsh and impoverished industrial ruin of tunnels and collapsing hive cities near Terra. Horus was then raised personally by the Emperor and became deeply loyal to him, earning a position as his right hand. When his brothers were found 20 years later across the galaxy, Horus already stood apart as the Emperor's closest son and most proven commander. Over decades of warfare, Horus demonstrated unmatched ability as a strategist and warrior. His Lunawolves Legion led countless campaigns, often called upon to break the most stubborn resistance. His record of victories and his profound bond with the Emperor placed him in a position of influence above the other Primarchs. In Ulanor, after a massive victory against the Orcs, the Emperor named Horus Warmaster, supreme commander of the Great Crusade, and from that moment forward, Horus held authority not just over his own legion, but also over the campaigns of his brothers, making him the most powerful figure in the Imperium after the Emperor himself. The Siege of Heresy. The Emperor entrusted the Great Crusade in Horus's hands and returned to Terra to focus on his secret work called the Webway Project, a human-controlled path through the warp. For many of the Primarchs, this felt like abandonment as they had shed blood for the dream of uniting humanity, and now their fathers seemed distant and withdrawn. Horus's rise to Warmaster also stirred up quite a bit of tension among the Primarchs. While many accepted his new role, others felt overlooked or even envious of the attention he received. This led to growing rivalries and divisions among the brothers, which ultimately weakened the unity of the legions. The Word-Bearers, under Lorgar's leadership, also contributed to the growing instability. Unlike his brothers, Lorgar had guided his legion to worship the Emperor as a god, spreading monuments and sermons across newly compliant worlds. The Emperor, however, rejected this and punished them by ordering the Ultramarines to obliterate Monarchia, the Word-Bearers' most sacred city. This humiliation left Lorgar feeling resentful and searching for a deeper purpose. It was during this time that Erebus, the first chaplain of the Word-Bearers, stepped forward. A gifted speaker and trusted figure, Erebus had already begun secretly spreading the teachings of chaos among his legion. He encouraged Lorgar's doubts and guided him toward the so-called primordial truth, the worship of the dark gods. While Lorgar believed he had found a higher purpose, it was Erebus who made him a servant of chaos. The corruption of Horus. Erebus also played a crucial role in Horus's downfall, effectively becoming the mortal mastermind behind the Horus Heresy. With his cunning influence, he orchestrated Horus's journey to Davin, a world steeped in corruption and infested with the Serpent Lodge cult, which secretly served the dark gods. Once on Davin, Horus was struck by Anatheme, a cursed blade wielded by Yugen Temba, a governor corrupted by the chaos god Nurgle. The wound was infused with the dark energies of the warp and should have been fatal. Erebus stepped in, presenting the Serpent Lodge as Horus's only hope for survival. Horus was then brought into their temple, and there a sinister ritual was performed that drew Horus into visions within the warp. In those visions, he witnessed a future where the Emperor abandoned his sons, enslaved humanity, and discarded the Primarchs once they had outlived their usefulness. Whether these visions were mere illusions or glimpses of possible futures remains a mystery, but to Horus, they felt all too real. The Chaos Gods presented Horus with an alternative path, and they promised him the power to overthrow the Emperor, to secure the Primarch's place in the galaxy, and to shape humanity's destiny free from the constraints of the Imperium. In his weakened state, Horus accepted their offer. He was restored to full strength, but this choice marked his transformation into the arch-traitor. Now corrupted, Horus wasted no time and began secretly turning other Primarchs to his side, promising power or freedom from the Emperor's control. Some, like Fulgrim and Angren, fell quickly, while others were deceived or manipulated. The Warmaster's betrayal was carefully hidden, but his loyalty to chaos was now absolute. The tragedy of Magnus. Magnus the Red, the Primarch of the Thousand Sons, had a chilling vision of Horus's betrayal while meditating on his homeworld Prospero. When he discovered that Horus had turned to chaos, he felt compelled to warn the Emperor directly. Driven by a deep reliance on his psychic abilities, he decided to use sorcery rather than making the long journey to Terra, even though the Council of Nicaea had strictly banned such practices. Helped by a mysterious warp entity, Magnus unleashed a powerful psychic spell to breach the Emperor's protective wards around the Imperial Palace. Unfortunately, this effort shattered the defenses the Emperor had carefully placed over his secret webway project. This unintended breach allowed demonic forces to pour into the structure, ruining years of meticulous work that was meant to ensure humanity's safe passage through the webway. The Emperor, seeing only the devastation, misjudged Magnus's intentions and deemed him a traitor. Seizing the moment, Horus manipulated Leman Russ, the Primarch of the Space Wolves, turning what was supposed to be a mission to arrest Magnus into a full-scale planetary assault. When the Wolves landed on Prospero, they unleashed unimaginable firepower and ultimately reduced it to ash. Magnus had been willing to face the Emperor's judgment, but the web of manipulation and mistrust sealed his tragic fate. The burning of Prospero not only shattered the Thousand Suns, but also pushed Magnus deeper into the embrace of chaos. He would end up serving Tzeentch, the god of change, who had been the hidden entity guiding his downfall all along. The Isstvan III Massacre. Horus's betrayal became clear during the Isstvan III atrocity, his first bold strike against the Imperium. Several legions under his command, Luna Wolves, World Eaters, Death Guard, and Emperor's Children, still contained loyalist elements who refused to turn against the Emperor. He launched a ruthless trap to eliminate the loyalists by ordering all 4 legions to attack the rebel world of Isstvan III. When they were deployed onto the surface, Horus unleashed a devastating virus bombing. The deadly Life Eater virus burned through the atmosphere, reducing the planet to a wasteland of ash and fire. Billions died instantly, and countless loyal Astartes were consumed. Yet against all odds, thousands of Space Marines survived in bunkers or underground shelters, including some of the Emperor's finest warriors. Captain Garrow of the Death Guard fought back against overwhelming traitor forces. The fighting in the ruins of Isstvan's cities turned into a desperate last stand. Garrow and a handful of survivors eventually escaped aboard the frigate Eisenstein, carrying with them the first warning to Terra that Horus had turned against the Emperor. The atrocity on Isstvan III was the first open act of the heresy. By slaughtering his own brothers, his rebellion could no longer be hidden. The Dropsite Massacre. After Isstvan III, the Emperor ordered loyalist forces to confront Horus directly. 7 legions were sent to Isstvan V, where Horus had fortified his position. The plan was simple. The loyalists would land and crush the traitors in open battle. 3 legions, the Salamanders, Raven Guard, and Iron Hands, dropped onto the surface and engaged Horus's forces. But what came next was one of the darkest betrayals in history. The 4 other legions sent to aid them, the Wordbearers, Night Lords, Iron Warriors, and Alpha Legion, had already turned traitor and suddenly turned on their supposed allies. This act, known as the Dropsite Massacre, shattered the loyalist ranks. Trapped between Horus's forces and the freshly revealed traitors, the 3 loyalist legions were almost destroyed. Their Primarchs, Vulcan, Corvus Corax, and Ferrus Manus, fought desperately to hold their ground. Ferrus Manus was slain by Fulgrim in personal combat, marking the first Primarch death of the war. The massacre left the loyalists broken, with only a handful of survivors escaping the slaughter. Horus's rebellion was now in full force, and nearly half the Imperium's legions had declared for chaos. From this point on, the heresy became a war for the very survival of the Imperium. The expansion of Treachery. Horus's rebellion spread unchecked across the galaxy, and entire regions of Imperial space fell into civil war as the Warmaster worked to secure allies and resources. One of his most important victories came on Mars. The Fabricator General Kelbor Hal pledged the allegiance of half the Mechanicum to Horus, forming the Dark Mechanicum. With demonic pacts and forbidden knowledge, they began producing corrupted war machines, Hellforged Titans, and new weapons powered by the Warp. Beyond Mars, Horus gathered mortal forces into his cause. The Imperial army was split apart as regiments swore loyalty to him, forming the Traitor Auxilia. Many worlds gave in willingly, either through fear or promises of power. These newly compliant planets, forced to swear allegiance to Horus rather than the Emperor, formed what became known as the Dark Compliance. With these conquests, Horus gained industrial bases, fleets, and manpower to match the Emperor's own. At the same time, chaos itself deepened its hold. Cults rose within the legions, demons appeared openly on battlefields, and the traitor Primarchs became more entrenched in their devotion to the ruinous powers. The Traitor's Trap. Horus unleashed one of the most decisive blows of the heresy against the Ultramarines. In the world of Calth, Lorgar and the Wordbearers launched a surprise attack under the guise of an alliance. The assault began with orbital bombardments and virus weapons, killing billions before Guilliman's legion could even respond. What followed was a brutal ground war and fleet battle across the system. The Ultramarines fought desperately, but Calth was poisoned beyond recovery, its sun damaged and its surface left uninhabitable. The betrayal at Calth exposed Horus's wider strategy. By striking Guilliman's 13th Legion, one of the largest and most disciplined, he intended to cripple a major pillar of Imperial strength. Even though Guilliman's forces survived in scattered groups, their losses were immense, and Ultramar itself became a primary target of chaos. In the aftermath, the Wordbearers and World Eaters rampaged across Ultramar in what became known as the Shadow Crusade. Cities and worlds burned as Lorgar and Angren spread chaos wherever they went. During this campaign, Angren was elevated by the powers of the Warp, transformed into a demon prince. Like him, many of his traitor brothers will also embrace this new, monstrous form of immortality under chaos. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the galaxy, the Thramas Crusade between the Dark Angels and the Night Lords consumed both legions. Though the Lion inflicted heavy losses on the Night Lords, the campaign tied down the Dark Angels, preventing them from defending the homeworld and reaching Terra in time for the final defense. Brothers' Betrayal. Horus prepared new schemes to weaken the Loyalists further. The Blood Angels, led by his closest brother Sanguinius, were lured to the Cygnus Cluster under the guise of a vital campaign. What awaited them was a massive demon ambush designed by Kabanda, a bloodthirster of Khorne. As they descended, the entire star system was revealed to be corrupted. Planets were filled with demonic hosts, and the skies themselves bled warp energy. The Legion was assailed on all fronts, and Sanguinius was singled out by Kabanda in a duel. The daemon shattered the Primarch's body, breaking his legs and nearly killing him, but Sanguinius rose again, striking Kabanda down. Meanwhile, his brother Fulgrim crossed a point of no return. The Primarch of the Emperor's Children, already tempted and corrupted by Slaanesh, was granted full apotheosis as a demon prince. Imperium Secundus. Lorgar, the Primarch of the Wordbearers, unleashed a colossal warp disturbance called the Ruinstorm, aiming to cut off the Emperor's loyalist forces. His goal was to scatter them throughout the galaxy, making it impossible for them to come together and defend Terra against Horus's advance. Loyalist fleets found themselves trapped, with astropathic messages lost in the chaotic warp and navigators rendered helpless. For Guilliman and his allies, this meant they were nearly cut off from the rest of the Imperium. Fearing that Terra might have already fallen, Guilliman was determined to find a way to safeguard the Imperium's vision. Teaming up with Sanguinius of the Blood Angels and Lionel Johnson of the Dark Angels, he founded Imperium Secundus, a temporary empire based in Macragge. The goal was to create a backup Imperium that could survive if the Emperor and Terra were lost. Guilliman took on the title of Lord Protector, though he offered the crown to Sanguinius, whose angelic presence brought a glimmer of hope. Politics quickly put a strain on the already fragile alliance as Guilliman's structured vision clashed with the Lion's secretive ways. Suspicion began to bubble up over his covert operations against both traitor and loyalist forces. Even though Sanguinius was offered the crown, he took it on with a heavy heart, insisting that the Imperium Secundus should stay loyal to the Emperor. These rising tensions highlighted how even the most devoted Primarchs struggled to trust each other fully in the chaotic times of the heresy. The March to Terra. As Horus tightened his grip on the galaxy, the road to Terra became the ultimate objective. The traitor fleets pushed ever closer, leaving devastation in their wake, while the Loyalists struggled to regroup after crushing losses. Entire sectors fell under the Dark Compliance, as Imperial worlds surrendered to Horus's new regime. The Loyalist Primarchs, scattered across the galaxy, raced to return to Terra. Ultimately, only Rogel Dorn, Sanguinius, and Jagatai Khan reached the throne world in time to take command of its defense. Dorn directed the construction of vast walls, bunkers, and artillery lines around the Imperial Palace. Horus, fully entrenched in his role as Warmaster of Chaos, brought every resource of the traitor legions, corrupted Mechanicum, and demonic allies. The attack was set, and the greatest civil war in human history would end at the very heart of the Imperium. The Siege of Terra. It had been roughly over 200 years since the Great Crusade, and now the corrupted Warmaster Horus was back on Terra, leading the traitor forces. The siege began with orbital bombardments that shattered continents, followed by waves of landings that battered the palace walls. One by one, the defenses of the Sol system crumbled, and soon the traitor fleets had Terra surrounded. The Loyalists fought with everything they had. The Imperial fists held the walls, the White Scars launched counterattacks, and the Blood Angels defended the Eternity Gate itself. Titans clashed on the palace grounds while demons surged into reality. Inside, Malkador the Sigillite made the ultimate sacrifice on the Golden Throne to hold back the warp breach caused by Magnus, giving the Emperor the focus he needed for the battle ahead. The turning point came when Horus lowered the shields of his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, challenging the Emperor to confront him. Together with Sanguinius and Rogel Dorn, the Emperor teleported aboard. As they navigated the ship's corrupted corridors, Sanguinius reached Horus first. The angel fought bravely but was ultimately slain, his body left behind as a final act of defiance. Then the Emperor faced Horus in the command chamber. Their battle erupted with psychic energy and godlike power, tearing the ship apart around them. Horus unleashed the full force of chaos, breaking the Emperor's body and nearly bringing an end to him. But in the final moments, the Emperor summoned all his strength, besting his son and finishing him with an ancient warp blade before the Chaos Gods could restore his strength. In his final moments, Horus shared a silent understanding with the Emperor, with his eyes begging for release. Despite his victory, the Emperor's mortal form was shattered beyond repair. His surviving allies placed him on the Golden Throne to sustain his life, while the traitor legions fled into the Eye of Terror, and Horus, once the brightest of the Primarchs, was gone, and the heresy ended with his death. Thank you for watching the Horus Heresy major events. If you like simplified versions, click here for more videos like this, and see you in the next one.